welcome to the latest episode of Vinyl and Celluloid. I'm your host Pedro, and in today's episode I'll be talking to Kate Siamro. Kate is a music expert with amazing playlists. She's based in Dallas, Texas, and works at Spinster Records. We will be talking about the great and not so great things about working in a record store, her favorite genres and artists, and what to do when you're in Dallas. Hi Kate, it's a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Aw, thanks for having me. I'm happy we could finally talk.
Yeah, it's been difficult to schedule, and this isn't the original take, but we will make it work.
It'll be a very interesting, odd episode.
It sure will be. It sure will be. So, Kate, I know you have a huge fan base on Instagram and across social media in general, but for the small percentage of the world population that doesn't know you, can you give them an intro? I know you're based in Dallas, work in a record store and in PR. I mean, how do you manage everything? Tell us all about it.
Oh gosh. So I've been at a record shop for almost 8 years. I got the job just from meeting David in passing, and we really hit it off. And God, it has become a passion. Basically, every day it's all about records, collecting, selling, turntables. It's hard to survive with only a record shop income. So I started working in PR as well, since my degree was catered more towards journalism. So that's why I took on the other job, which I love as well, because it's PR for philanthropic and nonprofits. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I'm in Dallas, Texas. It is the conservative Bible Belt, as you can call it. It is Texas. There's guns. It's wild. We love sports. We love barbecue. It's a very rowdy state, but I love it. It's sometimes I disagree with some of it, but for the most part, I really, really love where I live. I'm originally from Canada, so I would say I'm very Canadian in personality. So I think there is like a weird handshake between Texas and Canada, though. There's like a weird hospitality nature between the two places. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I could talk about music all day. Yeah, so.
And you're also a DJ, right?
Yes, and yeah, so I have like 4 jobs. Yes, I started DJing mostly because people would come in our store so often asking if we knew of any DJs for events. And eventually I was just like, man, I'm passing up a huge opportunity to like have fun with that. And it's kind of a weird bug. Once you get into it, it becomes very prominent, and it's just so fun to do. And the only thing I think I don't like about it is I like to go to bed pretty early. So the late hours are really not my pace. But musically, it's a lot of fun to play a song and have someone come up to you and ask you what it is. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, now, before we get to the good, the bad, and the ugly of working on a record store, I'd like to ask, how did you get into collecting vinyl, your favorite genres, your go-to albums, the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, so my parents were always music enthusiasts. Both of my parents love new wave. They love classic rock. They also like metal. And then they're all over the map otherwise. So I grew up with like a lot of 80s music. And I mean, my dad played bass growing up, even though he got an engineering job to be a provider and have a family. But growing up, he was very, very like, we're putting MTV on, we're going to have pop-up video on the TV. So I was watching a lot of music videos as a kid and just became really infatuated with the culture of music, whether it be the marketing portion, the creative portion, or just how it affects the world, because it does have a domino effect. I believe like fashion is inspired by music and vice versa. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole that way. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, record-wise, the first record I ever got was from my mom, and it was Cat Stevens' Tea for the Tillerman, which I think for an intro album, that's amazing. But I think the first record I bought for myself was Postal Service Give Up. I think it's called Give Up. But yes, it was a Postal Service album. And I got it my senior year in high school. And I didn't even have a record player yet. I bought it because I was so in love with the album and I didn't think I would see another record of it again. And now I've sold, hundreds of them. But it was like really sentimental to me. And I think for a similar reason, a lot of people get into records. I remember picking it up and loving the physical touch of it and the artwork and the ability to just, own it. I'm like, oh, I physically own music. And I think if you grow up in an era where Napster was very prominent and downloading music, you start to appreciate the physicality of it. So.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, those are also the very same reasons why I started collecting. Between YouTube and Spotify, you can find pretty much everything, but you are still deprived of that experience of ownership and going through the lyrics, the inserts, and all the grabbing and holding the album cover as you listen to it. So yeah, Cat Stevens was your first musical exposure. I know from our previous conversations that your taste is quite eclectic and that you're really into world music, right?
Yeah, I listen to a bit of everything. I mean, I got really into Afro funk last year. Actually, a few years back, I really got into Fela Kuti. I mean, it's all over the place. Also, I feel like people I've dated in the past turn me on to a lot of different music. I really love dance and disco, especially Italian disco. I really love. I feel like there's some bands that are like intro level record store people music that you get into. And I know that sounds weird, but sometimes there's a band that I really like and my friends might not know who they are, but when I meet other people who either DJ or they are heavy vinyl collectors or work at record shops, they immediately are like, oh yeah, I love the Monks, like I'm a huge fan of the Monks. And often I'll talk to girlfriends and they have no clue what I'm talking about, but I feel like I'll talk to someone else at a record shop and they're like, dude, everybody knows that band. So, sometimes the stuff that I think is a little more underground is already known by others. Yeah, it's
A bit
really.
of a rainy on your parade, right?
Yeah, it's okay though. I honestly, it's hard nowadays. It's hard to educate people because you have the internet. I always like to try and assume everyone knows everything just because, it might be a poor way to going into a debate. But I feel like with the internet at your fingertips, I mean, I meet people and they've watched every documentary of a band and they did it all in one night on their laptop. So.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Nowadays, you can basically do a quick search, get 5 documentaries, and suddenly you turn into an expert in a band. Almost overnight. And I think the last time we spoke, you were into Bulgarian rock or funk, something from Belarus, I believe, something from Eastern Europe. That's for sure.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I go through music really quick. I was listening to a lot of, oh gosh, December, so it was sad and cold outside. I was probably listening to a lot of like Eastern European new wave. I was going through like a real dark synth. I don't want to call it a phase because it's something that always comes back to me. Like it's never something that goes away. But gosh, yeah, I was super into Boy Harsher at that time, which I still love Boy Harsher. They're about to tour through Dallas. Um, God, yeah. I went to Cruel World Fest since we last talked, and that was like a goth new wave music festival, and it was Bauhaus and just a ton of like classic gothy new wavy bands that I really, really love. So yeah, it changes pretty quick. I sometimes forget what I'm listening to months later because it's just a new song every day.
Yeah, well, you do have a privileged access to a vast library of music and also a professional duty to be on top of multiple genres and the latest releases.
It truly is a privilege, yes. It's always coming through the door whether I like it or not. So,
Very true, very true. Since the last time we spoke, you started, how shall I call it, a new series of reels on both TikTok and Instagram. something about what does a record purchase say about your date or person you are with at a record store?
Yes. So I started making. I got a TikTok because I was like, why not? And at first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep up with it with video content because it takes a lot of energy out of you to like think of something that you think is worthy to be a video, and I don't know. I just didn't want to annoy people with myself as much as I already do with Instagram. So I like I was talking to a girlfriend, and I always make these funny. I hate calling it funny. It's probably just asshole-ish comments about people when they buy something. I'm always like, oh man, that guy seems like he smells like peanuts if he buys that album. Just like weird stuff. And we were joking. She's like, man, you should like document these comments and post them online. Like, what assumptions can you make about your date from the record they buy? And I was like, oh yeah, like we should totally do that. And yeah, I kept doing it over and over again, and eventually I was like, okay, I need to make this a video now because I just do it too often. And yeah, we were talking about red flags and green flags, and good signs. Like there's certain records guys buy, or women, either or. I should do some for the girls. Or whenever I make it in my mind, it could be anybody. I think just because I primarily date men, I usually focused on that because that's what I'm judging. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's certain albums where I'm like, oh, that guy, he's going home to an apartment full of plants. He has an espresso machine. He has the works. Like, that's a works album. And then someone else might come in and grab something. I'm like, oh no, like this is a guy who's leaving his laundry next to the bed and he uses like the worst conditioner. Just, I don't know. It's kind of judgmental, but it is a little funny because I feel the more I talk to people, the more they align with the assumption through music. Like you just have this idea of somebody when they say something musically they're into. And I mean, I guess that's what coined the term guilty pleasure, It's just sometimes there's stuff we listen to and you're like, oh, that person really likes the Hallmark Channel for romance movies, or this person is really intense and they listen to this because they're just such an intense bitter soul. It's so goofy, and I don't mean it all seriousness. I don't really believe anyone's a certain way, but it is kind of fun to poke fun at people.
Well, it sure is, and I personally love it. And to prove it, I'm going to put myself in a very vulnerable
Oh
position.
no!
You know what my favorite album of all time is, and I'm going to throw two more albums your way, and I'd like you to judge me based on those purchases.
Oh no! Okay, let's do it.
It's all good. It's all good. All fair shots. So let's start. What vibes do you get from someone who buys Billy Joel's The Stranger?
Okay, you know what? That is actually a really good album, and I grew up not liking Billy Joel, which is so weird, because I don't know why when I was younger. So I have this belief when guys like Billy Joel heavily, they're really cheesy, but in a really funny way. Like, they're the guys who are trying to tell dad jokes in, like, really awkward situations. There's just, like, a cheeseballiness to, like, Billy Joel to me. And it's charming now. When I was younger, I used to hate it, but now I'm, like, in love with it. But The Stranger, oh my gosh, she's, like, a woman to me. Like, it's, like, I would assume a hopeless romantic if someone was buying Billy Joel's The Stranger. If a man was buying that record and he's on a date, that guy's having a good date and he's a hopeless romantic.
Okay, I'll take it as a compliment. So, round two, Quentin Tarantino's soundtrack. And to be more specific and make it easier, I'll use the last one that I bought, 2007's Death Proof.
Oh, Death Proof. Oh, that's a deeper cut of Tarantino. Oh, that's like a bit older. Oh gosh, if he's into that, I would assume he has a leather jacket in his closet that he hardly ever wears, but he bought it to feel cool at one point. He was just like, yeah, I got a leather jacket, but he doesn't really wear it out or anything. So
it's neither a red nor green flag, pure amber, right? Well, you got half a point there. I do have two leather jackets, and I do wear them often. And so for the last round, anything by Van Halen, the David Lee Roth era.
Oh, Van Halen? Oh gosh. Okay, I always assume this is so cheesy, and I think Van Halen fans would understand it. But I always assume guys who are in Van Halen were the dudes that were really into like librarians and teachers growing up. Like they like women dressed in pencil skirts. Like they have this weird thing about women in like these like kind of outfits. I don't know what it is, but all the guys I know who really really love Van Halen, they're always like into like this outfit that looks like a secretary. I don't get it. It's a little, I don't want to say it's sexist, but it's kind of aged in its own way. Maybe it's the too hot for teacher kind of thing, but yeah, I would say one of those. Yes, for Van Halen.
So your final score is 2.5 out of 3, which is
Thank
really
you.
great.
I feel pretty decent in my
Great judgment of
scoring.
character. Now, shifting gears, working at a record store. I mean, for many it would be a great experience. I know for sure. For me, it would be a dream job, actually. But I'm sure that there are some downsides. And one example you mentioned in our some of our conversations and also in your stories is the casual sexism or not so casual sexism.
I always say I used to. You know what's so funny? So I used to say it was casual sexism, but I always feel like it's only casual to the person who's being sexist, you know. And then like anyone else, it's like never casual. You're like, oh, this feels very blatant and kind of weird. I feel I have numbed out with age working at a store where there is usually sexism. It doesn't mean that I'm not immune to it, but I think it's uncommon to hear something new that throws me off because I've heard things repetitively, like, and ageism too, to its extent. I have new ways of dealing with ageism where someone tells me I'm too young to know about something or, whatever. I think sometimes I like to assume it's coming from a place of relation and shock. Like an older person who's like, oh wow, like someone younger actually likes this, versus, oh, you're too young to even like this. But, I mean, I think the harder thing nowadays is, I think the biggest annoyance for me, and I try to keep the everything chill in the store at all times. I hate interaction. I hate confrontation. That's a better word for it, which is surprising for someone who's so judgmental of people's music taste. But I would say the thing that annoys me recently is people who come in and they take a bunch of pictures with records, but they don't own a turntable and they don't buy records and they don't necessarily want to listen to that album. And they'll it's funny for me to say because I take pictures of records all day, but at the same time, I would never take a photo with anything that I don't intend to buy or that I play or I listen to or something that, I'm wanting to sell. But I think it is weird. Some people will come in, and we're in a very beautiful area of Dallas. So we do get influencers in who don't want a turntable or will never buy records from a record shop, but they'll like come in to take pictures to be in the aesthetic of it, which I think is really bizarre. And depending, I mean, sometimes it's been good for us because who knows, maybe there's someone on their page and they're like, oh, now I know this record shop exists because I follow this girl for fashion. So there's bittersweet parts. But I just feel oftentimes when people don't buy even a little thing, I'm like, you could like buy a 45 or a sticker or something if you're using the place as like a photo booth, But sometimes that annoys me. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty sick job. I can't complain. I mean, me complaining about working at a record shop is like depressing, because it's such a good job, it's such a great place. I mean, there's really not a lot of bad things I can say about it. I've waited tables before. I've been a barista. I've worked other jobs where I've sat in my car dreading going into work, Like I'm taking deep breaths because I'm like, oh my God, I have to deal with hangry people. People are so hungry and angry at the planet. And what if the kitchen's behind and then I'm behind? I've had like nightmares about waiting tables, that's a stressful job, but I'm working a record shop. The most stress you have is someone who's just being a prick to be a prick, you know? So, and they know they're a prick, so you don't even have to do much. They already feel like crap, you know? So,
Well,
yeah.
that's true. I mean, any client or customer facing job is difficult. I mean, I don't work at a record store, but I can surely understand your frustration. Sometimes I'm at a store and people are just there taking photos for Instagram, and they just or sometimes they just buy stuff, albums to display and as decoration, and I guess nothing wrong with that. But still, records aren't cheap, right?
They are not. And, it's gotten more expensive too, which is, it's like a good and bad thing. I mean, it's good that it's popular, but I hate that the demand of it has caused it to go up in price because, I miss getting a record for a bit cheaper. And we have something kind of odd in our store that I don't see in other stores. But on our stage, we have these movable crates, but we filled them with all the vintage we just get in. And basically, it's like a crate digger's dream because it's all stuff that's not priced out yet. So we literally have a non-priced section, and if you want to dig through it, you can. Because it's very time-consuming to price out albums because you're making sure is it clean? Does it play? You want to fix up the cover. You have to go on Discogs, price it out. Sometimes you have to question the price because you're like, this is like all over the place. So it's a process, and to do it for every individual record, it does take up a bit of time. So we like having that section at the store because it lets people, dig through whatever they want without having to wait for us to speed up the process, So then they can bring it up and I can look up the price for them, check what it is, sell it on the point, And I kind of like that experience, buying without a price.
I think we just bumped into the solution to your influencer slash poser problem. Just make crate digging cool again, and then if they come into the store, they'll need to buy something because offered to record them whilst they crate dig.
It's such a good feeling. I always like when people buy albums without listening to them. Like they see an album and they're like, yeah, I like the vibe on that. Because that's the most old school way to buy music, Nowadays people come in and they have like, Spotify up to their ear, listening to every album they go through. And that's fine too. I've done that before. I would lie to say I haven't done that. But it is kind of nice to buy music on a whim, And you just get something.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And on that note, what was the greatest find or the most surprising blind purchase you've ever made?
Ooh. Oh, I got one. So, I feel like a decent amount of people know this band, but I had never heard of the band Witch, Witch, just as it sounds. But I guess they're this Nigerian. I think it's Nigerian, like psyche, Afro rock like band, and I think they came out in the '70s. I'm not fully sure. I don't know a lot about their history, but their album was at the store in Colorado that I was at, and I think it was called Twist and Shout Records, and that was a really fun place to dig through. But I saw it, and it had someone left a note on it. I love employees who write notes on records. And somebody was like, hey, if you love like Smokey Robinson mixed with a little bit of Stevie Wonder, mixed with like psychedelic, like 13th floor elevator, but in Africa, buy this album. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sold. So I remember buying it without even listening to it and bringing it home and just playing it on repeat because it was so good. So yeah, that was like a very good find.
Yeah, that's a very very specific choice. Yeah, you mentioned that you're also into European disco, Italo disco, to be more specific. There's this artist who's Australian, but perfectly captures the Italo disco vibe of the '70s and '80s. Donny Bennett. Have you listened to his albums? What are your thoughts on his work?
I think I know who you're talking about. I'm so sorry. Yes, I have heard of him. Sorry, it took me a minute. I think the one that I was really hooked to is Biodonda. I think that's how you say their name. I hope I'm not butchering it. But they have a really great album that I was playing. It had like laser noises in the background. And I kind of like the cheese. I keep using the word cheesiness, but like there's like a cheesiness to Italian disco where it's like kind of like sci-fi noises, which I really love in music. I think it's really gutsy if you're gonna add like a laser noise to a song for some reason. But yeah. Anyways, sorry.
Nah, nah, nah. You're absolutely right. It's especially true when we watch those movies from the 70s and 80s. Some of them, like the European movies, lower budget ones, and some of them have like great soundtracks by established and respected acts like Goblin, especially the horror movies. But you also get more experimental sounds that feature the occasional Star Wars like shooting laser effects.
Oh yeah, the Star Wars disco is incredible.
Well, there you go. There you go. Back to your multiple careers, I mean, you mentioned several of them. I mean, this is more of a work-life balance question, but it seems like you're able to do it all. Like, enlighten us on how can we how can we do it also?
Uh, Not a lot of sleep and being comfortable in one outfit for the day. That's usually dressing for both occasions. Um, but yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's like weirdly like this mentality of going constantly and I don't know, like I get stressed out. I'm not scared of aging, but I get scared of being old one day and feeling like I didn't do enough. I don't want to be ever sitting around and thinking, "Oh, damn it, like I wish I went to that party or I wish I went to that event or I wish I took on that one gig, just for the extra pay. And that's the other thing too. I mean, I like money. I don't I don't intend to be rich one day. I don't think I'm a rich person in what I do. But I do like the ability to survive and support myself at all times. And that's like a huge deal to me. I never want to rely on anybody else. I like having that backup plan fund, enough money to survive the American healthcare system. Hopefully, so I mean that's the huge drive. I just being independent in a weird way, and I have a partner. I've been with the same person for 5 years. And I think the reason the relationship's always gone so well is we both can take care of ourselves. We don't need the other person necessarily, but the other person is definitely a benefit to living. So, yeah.
I think you nailed it when it comes to the secret ingredients of your success. Little sleep, have a great partner, and of course have a solid wardrobe.
Yeah, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, definitely dressing for like a double day of work. So,
So on the type of customer or customer profile that you get at Spinster Records, you already mentioned that you get all kinds of people. You get more younger people, older people, coming into the store. I know you're not 30 yet, so older may be a relative concept, but let's say use generation.
I'm getting there though. I'm 29, so I am totally edging into my 30s. I'm slowly edging my way into there. So younger people, absolutely. Half of our clientele is definitely Gen Z. I mean, that's one thing I do like because I consider myself a millennial, and I mean, there's the age groups are kind of silly because everyone's such an individual alone, but for the assumptions of the stereotypes of Gen Z, the one thing they do is buy records. Gen Z kids that I meet, they love maximalism. They love collecting. They love to buy artwork, and I really love that generationally because I feel like millennials, we were kind of screwing up these fun side hobbies by being minimalists. I know it sounds weird, but like Gen Z, economically speaking, is like definitely helping economy thrive, especially for small businesses because they like to buy and collect. They like to buy from smaller shops. I never get someone who's Gen Z saying they can just buy it on Amazon. I always get that from people who are in their 50s and up. And it's so funny because, you think like when you're older, you wouldn't be so tech savvy, but, older people want to save money differently. So they'll try to find the cheapest solution, even if it means buying for corporation. And I feel like I meet way more younger people who are aware of that and they want to be the change. And I really love it, So yeah, we get a lot of younger people, almost more than older. So.
I think this is the perfect segue into a question I always wanted to ask you. Empire Records or High Fidelity?
Oh, definitely High Fidelity. I like both movies, but I love High Fidelity. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So yeah, definitely High Fidelity.
And what is it that you like most in High Fidelity?
I honestly, out of any movie that has a record shop, it's the most realistic with the energy of working at one. Like, I'm definitely more of a Jack Black character, and Miranda and Priscilla are the bald guy, and then yeah, I think Paula, who works with me, is more of a Jack Black. You can like put people in a certain category of the three who work at a record shop, if that makes sense. Okay. And I really wish I was more of a John Cusack, but I'm too optimistic and positive and loud and abrasive I'm more of a Jack Black, whether I like it or not, so.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case with most of us. We all try to portray or go for that John Cusack dark mystique, but we're actually much closer to Jack Black, character-wise.
Oh, totally. I would. Mystique people don't do podcasts. Mystique people don't talk to anyone. Jack Black people are like excited to talk about ideas. So we're in our own realm, I guess.
Okay. So I'm getting the screw the man, save the empire vibe from you, but High Fidelity is still number one.
Yes, absolutely.
And so those Gen Z customers, do they come to the store with an exact idea of what they want to buy? Do they go for the latest release? Or are they, more open to suggestions?
I mean, it kind of bounces all over the place. I feel like they're more stoked to see newer music on record. Like, I don't know why, but like, I just put out Childish Gambino's Because the Internet. And I had this guy come in who was in high school, and this happened today. He came in and got really excited about Because the Internet by Childish Gambino. And it was just such a reaction. Like, I had Gen Z, or Z, which you said, which made me so excited because I'm from Canada. And I used to say Z, but living in America, everyone's been like, why would you say Z? Because no one says Z here, they say Z. Anyways, Generation Z, sounds very evil all of a sudden. They are so reactive, like, and that's maybe just younger people in general, but they're so emotive, like very, like, immediately how they're feeling when they come in, and they get very excited, and they're very loud and expressive, and they definitely want to tell you what they want. And I think the hardest thing is telling them artists who aren't on record. Like, sometimes I'll have teenagers ask me for a musician who's on TikTok, but they're not, like, signed to a record label, so they don't have any records. And that's always, like, a little weird to try and explain that. Like, hey, like, usually they don't have any pressed albums. And that's a lot of, like, streamers online and stuff. Because it is expensive to press your own music and have it given to the masses. Even, like, a weird one, and they're massive, and they should definitely have a record. But is it BTS, the K-pop band? They're huge, and we get people in all the time asking for K-pop music, but there's no K-pop records, and I don't understand it, and I really wish I did. Yeah, I need to research it, because I really don't understand why we can't get any in. There's CDs that exist, so there's physical copies of it, but there's no wax. So it's very strange.
But is it a case where the vinyl simply isn't available in the US, but you can still buy it in South Korea?
It could be that. I mean, I've just never been able to find any. Even on Discogs, I don't think I've been able to find any. Um, Maybe they just don't think the market would buy it. But, if anyone's listening to this podcast and works for K-pop, people would definitely buy it. Um, I mean, K-pop is the new boy band, It's like K-pop is, I don't know how to describe it. Like, K-pop is everything to teenagers who are into it. Like, it NSYNC was to people.
Or Tokyo Hotel, like 15 years ago, the German band.
Yeah. Oh, really? I've never actually listened to them.
Me neither, me neither. You're just 15 years too late to join the mass hysteria.
Oh, I need to check them out. Man, I'm late to the party. I'm sorry.
It was a European thing, I guess. You're excused.
Okay, thank you.
And speaking of the massive trends, I have to ask you about 2022's biggest trend or ongoing trend, Kate Bush.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's crazy over here. It's all you hear. I hear running up the hill like 4 times a day at least.
Yeah, well, I was on a train station the other week, and you got several street performers there. It's a big area. And I can assure you that like 3 out of 5 were playing Running Up That Hill.
Yeah, I feel I've always liked Kate Bush. I'm not like a crazy Kate Bush fan, but I've always like enjoyed her music. And my name's Kate, so, I really love that she carries the name so well. But I feel I'm excited. I'm always excited when older songs have like another I don't know, I'm trying to find the word for it. When older music, yeah, like they have a new generation appeal and a new experience with the song. And we've had this through TV shows constantly now. Like, anytime I see something on Netflix, if the soundtrack's good, I have to remind myself to come to work and buy that album because I'm going to have people come in asking for it. Yeah, it's just that domino effect. When a movie comes out, if the soundtrack's good, the music's going to sell. And that's the best way to make music right now as a musician, I think, is to just make sure your music gets into film in some aspect. So yeah, I mean, that song, I love it. It's kind of been burnt out for me, It's been played so many times. I'm like, oh my God, please don't. And now I'm nervous because I'm seeing people ask about Cloudbursting, and I'm like, damn it, I really love that song. Please don't overplay it. And I mean, that's my reaction to every song I love. So whenever, I remember whenever Foster the People came out, they had the song Pumped Up Kicks that most people know. And oh my gosh, I loved that song. And then the radio kept playing it over and over and over again until eventually I just got so sick of it. And I couldn't listen to it for a while. Like, it took years until I actually enjoyed that album again. And yeah, it's just like, I hope this doesn't happen to Kate Bush with Running Up the Hill, but I think it might. I'm wondering how she's doing. I haven't really read any interviews.
Oh, she's doing fine, I hear. There was an interview a couple of months ago on BBC, and apparently she netted over 1 million during season 4. She's okay.
Yeah, man, I mean, she's probably retired, but that's that's boat money where you get a boat. That's amazing. That's incredible. Well, that's good news. See? Can't complain. Man.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree with your point. If there is a popular movie, something is popular on Netflix, and the soundtrack is good or becomes, for some reason hip, people will immediately want to own the music or score. I was kind of expecting that to happen with that TV show. What's his name? I didn't watch it. Peacemaker, the one starring John Cena.
Oh, which one?
Peacemaker, I think it's on HBO Max.
Oh, yeah, I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting it to, awaken a sleepy interest in hair metal.
Sometimes it's the demographic for the show. But not always. I don't know, though. It just depends how it's utilized. I really do believe, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of, like, another Netflix show where we had that effect. I mean, sometimes it's even just documentaries. Like, I've noticed lately, like, when Sparks came out with that documentary, we had, like, a whole... And, you know, we've had Sparks in the shop forever. And then out of nowhere, we had all these people like, oh, do you have this band called Sparks? And we're just like, oh, yeah, we fucking love Sparks. And we sold through that. The band that we saw it with for documentary was the Bee Gees. When the Bee Gees documentary came out, it was freaking crazy Bee Gees. And, you know, it might be different where you are, but at least in Texas. So, like, in Texas, America, the Bee Gees documentary came out. It was a huge hit. We had all these people coming in wanting the Bee Gees all of a sudden, and it was, you know, interesting. Same with biopics. We have, I'm not really interested in seeing the movie because I think it's going to be awful, but the Elvis movie's coming out. And, I don't know, there's something about it that makes me cringe. I can't explain it. I have to watch it to figure out why. So maybe it sold me in that way, but,
I don't know. I'm not a massive fan of musical biopics, nor am I a fan of Baz Luhrmann's for that matter. I mean, the soundtrack features Eminem, right? On a movie about Elvis. I think Luhrmann is just doing another great Gatsby. I mean, how can you make an Elvis biopic and run out of Elvis songs to include in it? You know?
yeah, I think, like, okay, this is a huge thing for me right now. It's been annoying me. But, there's, like, biopics that come out, and in my head, I'm like, how many times are we going to see the same story told? And there's so much music, and there's so many, like, let alone there's so many African American, Asian music, like so many other people, you know, to do a biopic on. And we've just had so many like old white dude biopics of the same thing repeating. And I just feel like there's so many more stories to tell. And especially stories that were never told properly. Elvis is a good example. I mean, he ripped off tons of blues musicians, and I really hope that movie covers, like, the amount of, like, African American people he ripped off and, you know, made a legacy for himself. And, you know, and there's other stories that, you know, talk about Elvis growing up in poverty and growing up, like, you know, African American community, and that's where he got it. But he really never really gave much of an homage to it, I think, and it never really got brought back to the community. So I think, like, biopic wise, I get really nervous when certain things come out because I'm like, damn it, I feel this is just taking us back, you know, instead of pushing us forward to being more educated about the roots of music. And I just think it's really important, you know, that would be covered more, you know?
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it, like I said, but I'm not expecting the movie to go into that level.
Yeah, and you know what? We are seeing, like I said earlier, with the movies coming out, like, I have a lot of people coming in asking for Elvis records. But sometimes, yeah, that kind of peeves me a little bit lately. There's so many more stories that need to be told. And, God, like, Elvis was, like, the last one I was wanting to see. And I grew up loving Elvis. I grew up with a dad who dressed up as Elvis for Halloween. But as I get older, like, even, like, the Priscilla Presley thing, you know, with her being, like, 14 when he's in his 20s, I'm just like, ew, like, gross. Like, why are we watching this story glamorized over and over again? But yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I really like Fela Kuti, and he's really, like, I would love to see a biopic on that grand level about an artist like that, you know, who's been influential in a different kind of way. Yeah, I don't know. That's just a personal opinion.
I think the major issue with musical biopics is volume. You just seem to get more and more as years go by, and very few at anything new. You know, just look at Bohemian Rhapsody, the one about Elton John, Rocketman, and that dreadful Motley Crue one, The Dirt. You know, they're very from like.
Do you ever wish it was more gritty?
Absolutely, but that doesn't sell tickets.
Yeah, true. I mean, you know what, though? I will say this. Like, Deadpool was one of the most ticketed rated R films, I think, right? Until something else replaced it. And I think, like, if Dirt came out and was able to pull off that Deadpool grittiness, but also have that humor that was really existing in the 80s amongst like those kind of guys. I just think it would be more real. Like, I would want to watch that because I'm like, that's how it was. And the same with like Bohemian Rhapsody. I wanted to see a real, like, I wanted to see like Freddie Mercury, but gay Freddie Mercury. You know what I mean? I wanted to see like real Freddie Mercury, how I see him in interviews and what I've read about and his drug usage, like the real stuff. I didn't want to see it suggested. I didn't want to see like they just like they made it into like a Disney movie, and it wasn't like, you know, it totally took away the grit that Queen had. And now when I think of Queen, I think of family friendly. And it's a shame because they're pretty hardcore, you know? Like, when you look at the history of Queen, you're like, this is a badass band. And now it's like the family friendly band. And, you know, I know it's kid friendly in the music because, like, the lyrics aren't cussing or about sex and drugs necessarily always. So it does become kid friendly. But at the same time, like, when I watch Queen in a documentary, I want to see, like, all the dirty bits, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, well, let's see. When the dust settles, what's the viewership on the NC-17 Blonde and how the movie plays out?
I'm like a little conflicted about that one too. I'm like being really judgmental. So, but like, so that movie's interesting to me. So I grew up with my mom reading that book. I have a really fond memory of living in Michigan and my mom reading Blonde in the Marilyn Monroe story. But the book is a fantasy version of Marilyn Monroe's life. So it's not even like a real accurate depiction of her in any aspect except for the fantasy one that we love. And the weird thing about that book is it's, you know, it's written by somebody else who isn't Marilyn Monroe. So we're not really experiencing anything autobiographical. It's going to be more a fantasy depiction of what we see Marilyn Monroe as. And it's kind of sad because I feel like it just milks this iconic thing of a human who was very distressed, who was like really used and abused. And but in the book there's like, I think there's 5 sexual assaults throughout the book. And I'm interested to see like when this movie got the rating, because it has like a pornographic rating. I can't remember the
NC-17.
Yes, so it has one of those. And I'm curious if it's because there's a pornographic scene in the sense of her wanting pleasure, or are we getting like this weird rape scene that's really cringy because it's directed by, I don't know who's directing it, but I just feel like we keep getting this like really like softcore shock value in film, and it doesn't really help the issue that women have with it in the real world. It just kind of accentuates the normality of it. But I think it's never done in the proper grit way to explain the messed upness of it. I feel like it's always, I don't know, I'm conflicted with it sometimes. So I'm intrigued to see, I'm going to watch it because I grew up like really infatuated with Marilyn Monroe like many other women are. And men, everyone. How can you not? But I'm interested to see how it's utilized because, you know, and I'm sure we're going to get people coming in asking for Marilyn Monroe's music because she did sing a lot and she was a very musical person. So, I don't know. I'm intrigued. I don't know. I sometimes think too much about the money cash grab of film versus the quality, you know?
For sure. It's a critical aspect, and I guess Bohemian Rhapsody's commercial success fuel the current volume of biopics we have, and the ones that are being released almost every 2 months. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Showgirls, but if you want to have a comparison criterion, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of the last wide releases to carry that rating.
Oh, is Showgirls that way? I didn't know that. That's the one with Cher and Christina Aguilera, right?
No, no, I think that's Burlesque. This one is from '95. Stars a girl from Saved by the Bell, Elizabeth Berkley, and Twin Peaks Kyle MacLachlan.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, I actually haven't seen that before. Oh my god, I can't believe I confused it with Burlesque. That's so funny.
I think they're both campy, but yeah, Showgirls is a good anchor to know what to expect from like the full extent of an NC-17 movie.
Yeah, I mean, I never mind like I never mind real sex or nudity in a film. You know, like that's not something that would ever bother me. I'm just like, ah, okay. But I think sometimes like rape scenes, of course, like kind of mess me up the wrong way. Like when I'm seeing it, I'm just like, oh my god, I can't watch this. Like this is like really like, whew, you know, like and I don't know. I just feel like depending what it is, almost in a weird way, when it's suggested, it's not as triggering as it is artful. I think like I'm trying to think of a movie where it's suggested that it happens and it's more artfully done, but it still keeps to the seriousness. And I don't know. I've talked to people about this before. I've talked to other women about this, and I feel like so many women I know feel very, very differently and all over the place about it because it's such a serious subject. But I am down though for more penis in movies because I feel like women, there's always boobs, and that's fine. But I think we need to become more comfortable with like a naked guy in movies.
Well, then you need to watch the Swedish American movie Pleasure.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll watch Pleasure. That sounds great.
I would say it's a 50-50 split in terms of nudity by gender.
You're also in Europe. I feel like Europeans are way more comfortable with nudity. In America, like, it's so funny though. In America, people are very, like, intense about nudity. Like, oh my god, it's ridiculous here. There's a pool up the street from me, and they have restrictions on your bathing suit and how much skin you can show in a bathing suit.
That's Texas for you.
You're not allowed to have your butt cheeks out. Like, how are you supposed to get a normal tan? Like, it's so conservative. Yeah, they want to see your short line in your bathing suit. It's so
It
ridiculous.
may be an aphrodisiac in some parts of the world. Well, you mentioned one of the downsides of Dallas and Texas overall, but what about the positives? I mean, what's the cultural life like? Nightlife, etc. I know you go to a lot of gigs, but if I were to visit Dallas, what would you recommend?
So, anytime I have friends or family visit from out of the country, I do take them to do a lot of Texan things because I feel like myself, like being from Canada, I still, to this day, having lived in Texas for, like 14 years, I still glamorize this state in a very country way because I can't help it. Like, I love everything country about Texas. I love the cowboys. I love cowboy boots. I love when people have twang in their accent. Or when I meet a man and he calls me ma'am. He's like, excuse me, ma'am. And I'm like, oh my God, he's Texan. You know? But I have to admit, there's so much more here than that. And that's kind of the tragedy to it because it'll forever be in its glamorization. And I mean, I guess the same thing goes for any city in Europe is always glamorized to tourism, you know? And you go to Paris and you're like, oh, the city of love, Paris, people do that crap. But there's so much more to Paris than, that,
Yeah.
There's edge, a different kind of edge that isn't, stereotypical. So in Dallas, though, in the area I'm at, so I'm in Bishop Arts. So this is where Bonnie and Clyde came through. So historically, a lot of the buildings are where Bonnie and Clyde used to hang out. So in the 20s, it was kind of this weird Polish, German, French immigrant area. It was always kind of more on the poverty side until the 50s and 60s where they built Kessler Park out, which is a really fancy area. But this area is cool because you can go to Clyde Barrow's grave. So that's kind of cool. Like, I don't know why I think that's really interesting.
Oh, I know it is. I mean, no matter where you come from, you've surely heard of Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, they're like a very iconic story. And I think when you live here, people don't think it's that big of a deal. But when I moved here, I remember being like, whoa, Bonnie and Clyde? Like the lovers who were crazy maniacs and robbed banks in the South. So yeah, so they came through here. He's buried here. She's buried far away because, you know, they weren't quite the best couple. You know, her family was disappointed. And then also, I mean, barbecue's a given. I feel bad when people come to Texas and they're vegetarian. Of course, there's vegan and vegetarian options here, but I'm not going to lie. This whole state really relies on steak and, and meat. It's a very meat-heavy city. I also suggest to anyone who ever comes here, do not come during the summer. Our heat is brutal. I think, well, we're 105 right now Fahrenheit, but in Celsius I would like to think that's like 35 Celsius.
35, around that.
Yeah, around there. So it's brutal. It's like a heat wave right now. So everyone lives in air conditioning. No one goes outside during the summer.
But you also got the extreme opposite, right? During winter, no?
Oh yeah. So yeah, the winter it freezes over here sometimes. We have ice storms. We have tornadoes. I've been in a tornado before. It's not great. It's pretty scary. Yeah, it's kind of a shit show. Now that I'm talking more about it, I promise though, it is a Wild West experience, and the people are friendly, and it's super cheap. Like, Texas is one of the most affordable states to live in America. So, like, if you are ever moving here, Texas is a great place if you want to buy a house, start a family. It's very, like, family-oriented in that way.
And in terms of the music scene and bars, I mean, what would you recommend?
So my favorite punk bar, even though they do all genres, is Three Links. Most of these places are going to be based in Deep Ellum. So when you come to Dallas, our main music strip is Deep Ellum, and it's actually on the other side of the city from where I'm at and work. But Deep Ellum is like all the venues, graffiti bars. It's like at 2 a.m. it's a total mess. Like, there's people throwing up, and it's just wild. Right now it's getting a little bit more sketchy, and a lot more people getting shot and stabbed. But it is the Wild West down there. I think actually one time a guy got hit with a bow and arrow, which is so crazy. Someone did a drive-by with a bow and arrow, and I'm not messing around. Like, I'm serious. Someone did that. So,
Because there's less stand, I guess.
yeah, so it's a little interesting. So, but yeah, Three Links is a great bar, and then there's another one called Double Wide, and it's a trailer park theme, which I love. It's really over the top, very like tattoo bikers, you know. And then one of my favorite dive bars is this other one called Mike's Gemini, and it looks like a 20s bar on the inside. It has pool tables. That's like the place, if you move to Dallas and you're single, I always tell people to go to Mike's Gemini because it's so laid back. You're going to meet someone cool. Everyone cool goes there. Anytime I go there, I just meet someone interesting. Gosh, where else?
And what about that medieval place that you went to?
Oh yeah, well no, people should go there. So in Texas, okay, because you're in Europe and I need to explain this. So in America in general, there's this thing called Medieval Times, and it's a restaurant that's built out like a castle, and on the inside they have like this big section that they have horses in who do jousting, and it's medieval times. Like, the whole theme of the place is that you are in medieval times and you're kings and queens and you eat with your hands, and there's huge turkey legs, and it's super stereotypical of everything of that time except the plague. And there's horses and knights, and it's really I'm not lying, this is a real thing. So you just buy the ticket. You go inside, you have this experience.
And just a little bit of trivia for our listeners out there. This chain of restaurants was featured in Jim Carrey's The Cable Guy and the 1980s classic Married to the Mob.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and it's really cheesy. And I actually, we went last night expecting it to be dead. Like, we thought it was going to be really slow, and it was packed. There's, people everywhere, and we're like, oh my god, this is, a real thing. And the worst part is, the group I went with all the Spinster Records people, they all dressed up as knights. We all dressed up, and no one else was dressed up. So we were like this weird group of people who looked like they were about to go LARPing. And yeah, it was interesting.
Now you know how all the Trekkies feel like when no one dresses up.
It's a real feeling, guys.
So Dallas is a super vibrant city, in a nutshell, yeah. And then where do you usually go for live gigs?
So actually, the two bars I talked about earlier, Three Links and Double Wide, are great for shows, especially if you're a newer band touring through, because they'll hook you up with local bands. But I would say aside from that, I really love the Kessler. That's up the street from Spinster. That's an incredible place to go see shows. It's a pretty decently big size venue. It's like an old theater size. I mean the main spot downtown, like the main spot in Deep Ellum that's huge, is Bomb Factory for big shows. That's like thousands of people. And then Trees is a very famous venue. Has been there since the 90s, which isn't too long, but in Texas terms, that's forever. And it's just known for having Nirvana going through it, the White Stripes, like all these great rock bands have played there, and it has a good history. This sounds good. My favorite place right now, though, my favorite venue for music in general isn't even in Dallas. It's actually in Fort Worth, which is our neighbor city. But that venue is called Tulips, and Tulips is audiophile's dream. It's so they actually built in Sonos speakers into the whole place. So when you hear the music in there, if it's a quieter band, you can hear a needle drop if it's quiet enough. It's wild. It is the best sound system I've ever listened to at a venue. And that matters a lot. I think you should know yourself. If you collect records, you're going to be a little bit of an audio nerd, and you're going to be very pissy if the sound isn't good at a venue. So
Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, I think we'll wrap up around here. Okay, once again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you
Great
for
to have
having
you as
me.
a guest. We covered a lot today. Working at a record store, how not to be that annoying person that walks in for photos, and yeah, then don't buy anything. And again, a nice little summary of recommendations of what to do when in Dallas. And all I can say is hopefully I'll meet you there whenever I'm in town. Thank you.